I am Mama Ducks, Baby Duck, Mr. No Ducks himself, quack, quack. But watch this though. Smackdown in Fort Worth, Texas, in which I was in the building. So I probably got some inside stuff that y'all probably didn't get to see. If you will, go to my YouTube channel, go check out my shorts, man. You probably check some stuff that they didn't air on TV. Well, in this segment, we got the Miz versus Danhausen, man. And throughout the night, what they would do is they would cut off all the lights and they would just show the big screen. And one of the segments on the big screen was Danhausen showing up at the Miz house, right? So Danhausen ended up knocking on the Miz door. He had a star map. You know, when you go to Hollywood, you can get you a star map, and you can go, you can find out the addresses of all the stars or the stars that are listed. You can go to their house. So that's what Danhausen did. Danhausen ended up going to the Miz house. He knocked on the door. The Miz ended up opening up the door. And when he opened up the door, he didn't see nobody. He walked outside to see, like, dang, who was knocking on my door? By the time he came back in the house and he turned around, Danhausen was in his house. And Danhausen asked the Miz, who you looking for? And the Miz was like, what in the world you doing in my house, bro? And he was like, Danhausen was like, bro, you told me to come to your house and come curse your home. And the Miz was like, how in the world did you find my house? And Danhausen was like, I got a star map, of all the stars home. And the Miz was like, get out of my house. So the Miz went to the door to open the door to kind of, brush him out the house. But by the time he turned around, Danhausen wasn't there no more. So the Miz is walking through the house trying to find Danhausen. He ended up coming to his backyard and he ended up seeing Danhausen in his pool chilling on a float inside the pool. And Danhausen was like, come on in, man. Sure, the water is great, you know? And the Miz was like, what are you doing in my pool? You need to get out of my pool. And he's yelling at Danhausen. And Danhausen is like, shh, you need to kind of be quiet, man. It's people over there golfing. He was like, look over there. It's Allegiant Stadium over there. That's where WrestleMania is going to be held at. And the Miz is like, I, I know it's a golf course over there. I know it's Allegiant Stadium over there. This is my house. I know this is a pool. Like, this is my pool. You need to get out of my pool. So Danhausen ended up moving from one pool to the other pool. And he was like, are you satisfied now? And the Miz was like, no, I told you to get out of my pool. He was like, no, you told me to get out of that pool. I'm in this pool now. He was like, oh, you got two pools? He was like, oh, okay, cool. So the Miz get real mad. He say, get out of my pool. Get out of my house. Get out of my life. And he went to go attack Danhausen, but when he dived at Danhausen ended up moving out the way, and the Miz ended up falling in the pool, doing a belly flop, falling on his face. So it was to be continued, but we're gonna just go through the whole segment. You know what I'm saying? So later on that night, when the segment was continued, the Miz was coming out of the pool all wet and all this stuff, and he walking back through the house trying to find the Miz. I mean, trying to find Danhausen, and he can hear Danhausen playing golf. But the Miz got a virtual golf game where everything show up on the screen, but you pick up a real stick and a real ball, and depend on where the ball hit the screen, that is going to determine where the screen move at. So Danhausen is playing golf, in the Miz golf room, and while he cocked back to swing the golf club forward, when he cocked back, he ended up hitting the Miz in the nuts, and the Miz ended up falling to the floor. And he looked to the right and he see a display case with all of the like trophies and stuff that the Miz had got. And he seen a slammy as one of the trophies. He ended up grabbing the slammy, and when he jerked the slammy, the bottom part of the slammy ended up coming off, and ended up hitting the ground and rolling across the floor. But the Miz is laying on the floor because he just got hit in the male jewels area. So Danhausen is getting ready to leave the house, and he passed by this bowl of chocolate. He was like, free chocolate. He stick his finger in the chocolate, taste the chocolate, like, it's good chocolate. When he go out the front door, he opened up the front door to go out, and Maurice is coming to the house. So he ended up seeing Maurice, and Maurice is like, you. And Danhausen like, me. He's like, yeah, it's me. How you doing? I'm Danhausen. You know what I'm saying? He's trying to introduce himself to her. And the Miz is coming up from behind Danhausen with a bowl of chocolate that Danhausen just stuck his finger in. And he's trying to throw the chocolate at Danhausen, but Danhausen ducked, and it ended up hitting the Miz wife. You know what I'm saying? And she started coughing. She started choking and all that stuff. And while the Miz is trying to console her, Danhausen ended up stealing their daughter bike, this little bitty small bike with a bell on it or whatever. And he ended up rolling out of the gated neighborhood on the Miz daughter bike. You know what I'm saying? So that led to the match that Danhausen and the Miz end up having later on that night. So Danhausen come down to the ring in the little Danhausen car, the little golf cart with the coffin kind of theme to it or whatever. And the Miz come out to the ring with Kip Wilson. So during the match, the slammy that Danhausen stole from the Miz is sitting on the announcement desk. So Kip Wilson ended up snatching the slammy off of the desk, which distracted Danhausen. The Miz thought that Danhausen was distracted, tried to pull a little slick move on him, but Danhausen ended up ducking the move. He ended up hitting him with a crossbody block. Then he ended up going to the second rope, kicking the Miz in the face, jumping off the second rope, hitting the Miz with a hurricanrana. So it was pretty much like a comedy match mixed with real moves because I didn't know nothing about Danhausen until he came to AEW. So Danhausen can wrestle. I'm not saying he like a great wrestler, but he can wrestle. I seen that in AEW. So for the WWE audience who probably don't watch AEW, they probably don't know that Danhausen can wrestle. But matches like this, which got a little comedy in it, it also showcases wrestling skills too. And I think that this was the point of them having this match. So anyway, Danhausen had a karate the Miz out the ring. You know what I'm saying? He started hitting his little Danhausen dance. Kip Wilson jump on the apron to try to distract Danhausen, and he do. And the Miz end up getting the upper hand. He throw Danhausen against the ropes and just started stomping that dude like he Stone Cold Steve Austin. You know what I'm saying? And when he got through stomping him, the Miz started celebrating. Kip Wilson jumped back up on the apron, and the Miz and Kip Wilson is celebrating together. Danhausen raised up like he Kane or the Undertaker or something. And when he raised up, he ended up hitting the U or cursed. And when he pointed at the ropes for curse, a pyro blast went out, ended up hitting Kip Wilson and hitting the Miz. Kip Wilson fall off the apron onto the ground. The Miz, he blinded. He holding his eyes. Kip Wilson ended up just rolling. I mean, not Kip Wilson. Danhausen ended up rolling up the Miz and getting the 1, 2, 3. So he jumped on the rope. He's celebrating. He doing all his good stuff. Danhausen, the music is playing, everything going on. When he get off the rope, he turn around. The Miz is right there in his face. So Danhausen, I don't know what it's called. I think it's called like a paddle ball or something. When he stand face to face with the Miz, he throw the paddle ball on the ground and it causes a big old explosion. But when it causes the explosion, the Miz can still see Danhausen because Danhausen don't really disappear. He actually causes a distraction and he moves around. He don't really disappear. So the Miz seen that he didn't really disappear, and Danhausen seen that the Miz seen that he didn't disappear. So Danhausen started running. He jumped out the ring. The Miz chases him out the ring. He jumped back in the ring. The Miz chases him in the ring. He jumped back out the ring and go under the ring. The Miz jump out the ring and go under the ring. When Danhausen come out on the other side of the ring, Kip Wilson is standing on all fours. I mean, he on the ground on all fours. So Danhausen jump over Kip Wilson and keep on running. The Miz come from under the ring. He don't see Danhausen, so he end up bumping into Danhausen and both. I mean, he don't see Kip Wilson. He end up bumping into Kip Wilson, and Kip Wilson and the Miz end up falling down, hitting the ground. Danhausen end up jumping in his housing mobile and putting the pedal to the metal and haul behind and it up the ramp. But it's a golf cart, so a golf cart don't go no more than 4 or 5 miles per hour. So he ended up, going up the ramp as fast as he can go. And, that's the way that they ended the segment, man. If you like comedy, if you into Danhausen, the new prospect, you know what I'm saying? If you into Kip Wilson, also another comedy prospect that people jump on. The Miz, I used to not like him back in the day, but I've been liking The Miz for a long time, seeing his hard work, his ethic, his dedication, especially he definitely one of the top dudes on the mic. I don't care what nobody say, man. So if you into any one of these dudes, I would say you should probably go out your way to go and watch this match. You know what I'm saying? But watch this, though.